It's not often that you get to meet people who are some of the most fascinating people that exist, people that have experienced not only business at the highest level, but politics at the highest level, who have a comprehensive understanding of complex problem sets and their ability to solve those in extreme environments. And so the fact that one of my friends, George Sorial, has decided to join us today is not both just exciting for me because of the amount of respect I have for this man, but also because of the knowledge base he has and our ability to share that with all of you. So without further ado, I'd love to welcome George to the show.
Thank you, David. My honor, my pleasure to be here. Those are some very kind words. I'm not sure I deserve them all.
That's what you always say.
But I do appreciate them, so thank you.
Good, you're welcome. I think, everybody, obviously, we're in this crazy space of the tsunami of news stories and how we're no longer contained in this 8-channel, fishbowl of information, and now it's at an all-time high. In particular, you spend 5 seconds on X, and there's so many independent journalists going around, and what I've seen in particular, as the president has now moved into his second term, is the craziness is even more expansive. And it's the whole thing is who is he? Why does he operate like this? What gives him the right for this? Or he's like this, or he's like that. You're a person that has known the president intimately for 25 years now. And I thought it would be interesting to start the conversation with what it was like working in his organization, working for him, the relationship, but more importantly, the dynamic of running a multi-billion-dollar organization around the world and what that was like.
Sure. Well, I think shortly I would first say that I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
It wasn't, if somebody had told me 30 years ago when I was starting my career that it would have gone this way and I'd be working with a person like Trump, I would never have believed it. I immigrated to this country when I was a child, 2 years old. We actually arrived in New York by boat. My father was an educated person, as was my mother, but they didn't have any means. They didn't have much money. We literally arrived on a boat.
From Egypt, right?
Well, no, my father is an Egyptian, right. Christian, Coptic. Yep. He left Egypt in the 60s and was finishing his medical training in England.
Wow.
My mother is Scottish, from the Isle of Lewis, and there's a little bit of story to that. Born in the same town as President Trump's mom.
Wow.
That was one of the ways that we became close, but they met in England. I was born in England, lived in Egypt for about a year, came back to England, and then eventually emigrated to the United States. At the time, there were a shortage of physicians in America, and my father was recruited to come over there. He was a head and neck surgeon. But again, I like many people, I went to college. I didn't really have a plan. I was supposed to be a doctor like my father, but that didn't really work out. So I kind of went to law school by default. I'm just being very honest and blunt. And I spent some time in government. I did a fair amount of time in law firms. Then I met Trump. I actually met him on the other side of a deal.
Wow.
It was we were representing a group of Wall Street guys that were trying to develop a project in northern Jersey, which is now where Trump Bedminster is.
Wow.
And literally, David, at the groundbreaking ceremony, and this will give you some insight into what he's like as a person, I walked up to him and, as a kid who grew up in northern Jersey, Trump was always a larger than life character with the casinos, with everything else. And, here I am, this guy's helping himself to some shrimp. So I walked up to him and I introduced myself and, I said, look, I have something in common. I'd always heard that your mom was from Lewis. Well, that's where my mom was from. And, we ended up having a conversation, and then it came up in the conversation that I was looking to buy an apartment in Manhattan. So he gave me the number, a woman named Rona Graff. She was the office manager and told me, I want you in Trump World Tower. call Rona on Monday. Now, a lot of people in that sort of social setting will make statements, oh, give me a call. And then,
yeah.
But I called Rona, and a couple of days later, I was in his office looking at floor plans, and I bought an apartment.
Wow.
And that was kind of the beginning of the relationship. He started to give me some work. He'd call me up every now and again and ask me to attend events. I ended up buying the apartment. I became president of the board there.
Right.
And then 2006, he called me up one day and said, I bought all this land in Scotland. You're going to come and work for me. We're going to honor our mothers. Just like that. I didn't really know much
just
about.
On a call. Just, hey, George.
Well, come and meet me.
Right.
And, the rest is history. But at the time, I was really a corporate lawyer focused on M&A. I did a little bit of real estate work. But I certainly wasn't really equipped to take that job of building a golf course, hotel, and homes. But I just have always had this thing in me, David, that every so often I feel that I need to pivot and do something different with my career and with my life. And
where do you think that comes from? I just had this conversation with my good friend Sean Ryan just the other night. Is it in the way we thought, as he described it, as, oh, I get to a point where I've exhausted the excitement in it and I want to go do something else. Is it that, you think?
It's a combination of, I think, a bunch of things. Maybe part of it is that really what you're talking about is boredom.
Yeah.
The need to do something else. I've never been afraid to take on new challenges. I definitely am not the smartest guy out there. But I learn pretty quickly. I'm observant, and I like to be challenged and take on new things. Life is short. You really have to enjoy what you're doing career-wise. It amazes me how many people go through life, just going through the ins and outs of the day, and the weeks go by and they're not happy. You spend a huge amount of time at work. So you really need to do something that you love. And this is kind of a Trump thing. If you don't love what you're doing, you're not going to be good at it. Yep. That was kind of part of the ethos. The Trump organization was an interesting place. There was really kind of unchallenged loyalty to everybody. So that was a big theme there. Everybody was loyal to each other. There was a high level of trust and respect. But there was also people that were there liked what they're doing.
Right.
So loyalty and love of job, it really made, for a really nice work environment.
Was it a difficult transition coming from a big law firm in New York where, that's every 6 minutes, it's that getting your hours, to now it's like, hey, here's the mission, figure it out.
It was different. And, I had just become a partner, which, lawyers work towards that. So it was kind of a sobering moment. I mean, I went to my firm and, I asked the powers that be, look, I want to leave. I got this offer from Trump, and I said, go work for Donald. It'll be good for a couple of years and then you'll come back. I said, okay. And that was the other part of it, David. How do you turn down an opportunity like that?
You can't.
I said to myself, what's the worst case scenario? I'm going to do something new. I'm going to work with this man. I mean, I took my dad's advice was just do it. You're going to enjoy it. You could always do something different. That's another thing too. Nothing is, forever. You can always pivot in a job, in a career. And I think that is part of what makes a person successful, is that willingness to take on new challenges and not have fear about doing different things.
Wow. And you think that's really what entrenches somebody in that inability to see the potential in the risk. It's that fear. It's that core
change
fear.
Is a trigger for fear.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with fear. We're all scared at some point. It's really how you react and manage fear. And I think in some ways, fear of a new challenge at work is exciting.
Yeah.
And it can really motivate you and bring the best out of you. I mean, some people, when you put them under pressure, crack. Others become diamonds.
Right.
So I think it's one of the things that I was blessed with Some may say you're just plain old stupid, leaving something that
it's that first generation immigrant mindset.
But there was something really appealing to me about, I'd always respected him.
Yeah.
I'd always admired, how diverse his career had been. It's not just real estate, casinos. There's books, there's television, and then, by the way, he goes into politics when he's in his 70s at the highest level. But he's a person that I always respected. And, quite frankly, I was a little bit starstruck, I think, like anybody would be.
For sure.
And I said to myself, there's no losing here going to work for this person and his family. I don't think I would ever regret it. And that really, I came in, I was pretty clueless.
Yeah.
I initially did legal work, but really by the second or third month I was there, I was heavily involved in development, and really Scotland, Aberdeen was my first project. And I was sent over there with the remit that this would be an easy one. And it turned into a battle on many levels. Politically, we fought with many, you name the environmental group. It really turned out to be a 7 or 8 year chunk of my life.
Wow.
That was extraordinarily difficult at times.
Do you think he knew how hard it was going to be? And he's like, let's see how the kid does it.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
We didn't think it would be as challenging as it was. Initially we had a couple of stumbles. There was a very difficult hearing that didn't go my way. There was a lot of screaming and yelling. But I got a very interesting call from him late that night. And he said, calm down, put your bulletproof vest on, and get up, and we're going to fight this. And I remember at the time he said to me, in some ways, when you don't get what you want the first time, it's better when you win.
Talk about premonition.
Talk about a paradigm.
Yeah, right.
But to really in a long way to answer your question, I really enjoyed working with him. He, there's a whole side to him that we all see on television. But as a person that worked for me, I think I've said it publicly many times. I just did a series a year or so for Fox. And they asked me, what did you think about him? And the way I described it is really short of my own mother and father. There's a handful of people in life that have done, a lot for me. And, certainly President Trump is on that list of, I can't think of too many more people aside from my own parents. Think of the magnitude of that.
That's massive.
That did so much for me. And I my wife also worked with him. That's how we met. So we're 100% Trump family.
You're telling me that I don't even know how she ended up working for him, because she should have been painting pictures out in Central Soho. She's one of the best artists I've seen, man.
David, her story is remarkably,
Yeah.
She came out of Texas, flew up to New York, didn't know anybody.
Yep.
Responded to an agency ad, and all of a sudden is sitting in his office, and he hired her. But brave to leave a small Texas town and
For sure.
come to New York. A lot of people get lost, but she did well. So we're a whole we're a Trump family. He's been he's been good to us.
Well, and I think that's a real challenge for so many people. It is the persona, right? It is the guy on The Apprentice. It is the notorious, New York realtor, real estate guy. It's the guy who's in the rap videos and in the rap songs. And it's, the persona is so much bigger than as is typical for the man. But what I hear from people like you and other, like maybe Keith and other people that have spent a lot of time with him, there's a different component of him that draws out the loyalty in people. Can you describe seeing that over the years that you worked with him, and people coming in and out, and what that loyalty and the impact it had on the organization?
He has, it's interesting. Certain people, appeal to one demographic, but certain people appeal to all demographics. And I would say that Trump is one of those people that whether it's children, men, women, name the ethnicity, he's popular. He likes to get out. It's obviously different now. He's the president, but prior to all that, he very much would enjoy going out and just being with people, walking down a street in Manhattan, going to a movie, going to a restaurant. He would not want to be in the back private room. He'd want to be out with people.
Wow.
And I saw it over and over again. Again, you name the demographic, people coming up to him for autographs, for photographs. And he shook every hand, stopped and spoke to everybody. I think one of the things that people found remarkable about him, because, when I would introduce him to people, there was a certain expectation going in that he was going to be a certain way. And inevitably, the same responses would come out. He's amazingly focused. I felt he was really focused on me.
Wow.
He's down to earth. He's easy to talk to. He remembered my name. There was a certain sort of old world charm about him.
I like that.
The kind of person that, when you came into his office, he would rise to shake your hand. The organization was a very different place, but in some ways, a lot of the old formalities were observed there. Polite, how people spoke to each other, although at times
it'd be explosive,
things could get a little bit rough because, people were passionate about what they did and tempers would flare. But there was always a high level of respect and, there were none of this. It was a suit and tie every day. It was a very different place to work, but it was also a family and a very tightly knit group of people that, if you got it, there were people that would come in and, within a year they'd be gone. But there was a lot of people that stayed there for a very long time.
Right,
I mean, I was in the organization for 13, 14 years.
Wow.
And 5 or 6 years prior, working very closely with it. There was a lot of people that were there a lot longer than me. There's a lot of people that were there that are still there after I left. So it's not really an uncommon thing, but some of the stuff that I spoke about, and it wasn't just Trump, it was his whole family. Don, Ivanka, Eric, they were all held in high regard and respected because they worked alongside everybody. They weren't treated any differently. So it was a respect that was earned by kind of being in the trenches as opposed to being a part of the family. So, again, you have children, I have children. You can see a lot about a person by looking at their kids.
Right.
Your kids, in some ways, it's a humbling thing to say, but they are a reflection of who you are. Look at his kids. Look at his kids relative to others. And I think that speaks volumes for, how they were raised.
Yeah, I don't see Eric, his laptop getting out and discovering what we've seen in other cases, right? Yeah, it's just a different
totally
thing.
Different breed. There's a certain discipline.
Yes,
that I think that you don't see, in other, first families. Let's just say,
for sure.
But they were good people. They treated everybody well. By extension, the way the father treated people, that's how the kids treated people in the company. So again, it was I really enjoyed working there. I'm never going to say, hey, it was a highlight of my career. I'd like to think, you never know what's on the horizon.
That's right.
But I really enjoyed working there. I'm still very close with all of them. I still speak with people in the organization all the time. I try to do some work with them when I can. But it's really, it was a time in my life and my career that I really reflect fondly on.
What's up, everybody? Sorry again for the interruption. I just want to tell you about this incredible 5-day challenge that we're offering on davidrutherford.com or in the link in the description. And what this is your Embrace Fear 5-day challenge. Now, over the past 30 years, I've spent a tremendous amount of time developing what I call the frog logic concepts. I teach people to embrace their fears, to forge their self-confidence, how to live a team life, and to ultimately live with purpose. So what we want to introduce you to is how to get going in these ideas. And so we've got this incredible 5-day Embrace Fear Challenge. Again, the link is in the description. In this, there's 5 missions, 1 per day, that's going to ask you to do all different types of things, which is identify the fears which are running your life, accept the hard truth of where you are, retrain your mindset, to test your limits, and then to forge your courage to live with purpose. These involve both physical and emotional and mental aspects in terms of journaling. But I'm telling you, it's going to kickstart your mind as you begin to think about the number one emotion out of our 8 core emotions that impedes us from our successes, and that's fear. And trust me when I tell you, I've spent a lot of my life being afraid of things. When you're jumping out of a perfectly good airplane in the middle of the night, chasing 2 ducks into the middle of the ocean, you better believe you're scared. And this is the ideas that emerged out of my understanding of fear that I hope you can understand too, that will end up helping you be able to find your purpose in life. So here's the kicker. This is a free challenge. You don't have to pay for it. You don't have to buy it. You don't have to download anything. All you got to do is sign up, take the challenge, and get your life back on track, being able to embrace that fear in order for you to find purpose in life. All right, enjoy. Hoo-yah. Going back in those spaces where you guys were really establishing a whole new level of international leisure and hotels. I mean, you really became a juggernaut in the industry. Was it surprising to you that he would want to go into politics when he had all that taking place? I think that's one of the greatest. When I see the debates kind of all filter down to the focal point, the thing that always emerges is, why would this guy who had the ultimate life, the ultimate business, he was loved by everybody, why would he ever kind of pick a side and choose to go into this? Like,
it's an interesting question. And, look, I'm not going to attempt to answer for him, but I'll just give you my thoughts and my views. You're right, David. He didn't need this. He had a very nice life prior to what he got himself into. But, again, from what I observed was a growing frustration with the trajectory of the United States that maybe started from what I know anyway. I mean, I know there's some older statements and interviews that he did, but what I started to see started probably in 2012. Should I run? Should I do this? And there was kind of this voice, obviously, in his head that, things aren't going the way they should be. He very much had this ethos, which I think you have and I have, that if people like us don't take action and try to tackle some of these challenges, who's going to do it? Okay, you can't just sit back and say somebody else is going to handle the problem. You're confronted with a problem, you have to do it. And I know you understand that based on, you made the ultimate sacrifice, but I think he was going through that same kind of analysis. 2012 came, he didn't do it. There were some rumblings, and I think he regretted it. And that voice got louder and louder and louder.
Yeah.
And then there would start to be, one of the interesting things about how Trump makes decisions. I mean, ultimately, he makes his own decisions. He's been accused of not listening to anybody, which is really the exact opposite. He listens to everybody. Okay. The example that I always give, if we wanted to put a rug in a ballroom, he would have 5 or 6 samples on his desk. Every single person that came in the office, what do you think? What do you think? What do you think?
Yeah.
So he started those types of questionings about, should I run? Should I run?
Yeah.
Should I run for president? Should I do this? I think initially he had some thoughts of running for governor, maybe the mayor of New York. But, if he was going to do it,
why not go to the biggest?
Go big.
Yeah.
So there was a, 2016, I guess the voice just, became where he finally had to concede to that voice in his head, and he ran. And I remember.
Was there backlash in the organization and with the family?
There was a lot
not...
of, it was a family-run business. I mean, although the footprint for the organization is broad and global, when you talk about the higher level, it's a pretty small group of people.
Mm-hmm.
There was some concern about what's this is going to open up. The organization was very much led by him.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, as much as there were others, his children were very well respected. I mean, there was no clear, there was nothing more clear than who ran the company.
Right.
So there was that kind of, where is this going to go? But I think when everyone, I remember he once asked me, and I said, well, if you're going to run from behind your desk in Fifth Avenue, I don't know what's going to happen. And I really meant it. I said to him, if you're going to get out and meet people, I think you can win.
Really? You felt that?
Yeah, because there was something, there was once, he took a lot of pride in kind of giving his views on things and trying to teach the people that he worked with. And,
mm-hmm.
There was one day where we were working, we were on a construction site, and he just said to me, I'm successful. People ask me all the time, why am I successful? And he said, it's really easy. I look at what people want and I give it to them.
Right.
So he's also a voracious reader. I mean, he reads everything. And,
mm-hmm.
If you think about the elegance and the simplicity of that statement, I look at what people want and I give it to them. Again, that's another paradigm for what he did in 2016.
Right.
People got fed up of the politicians. I mean, even, everybody from, it doesn't matter.
It's Bush
what
or
your
Obama,
career
it doesn't
was,
matter, yeah.
What side of the aisle you were, even people like myself who try to be, I watch the news, people were getting fed up with what was going on. And I say that means both sides of the aisle.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really refreshing to have a business person like him, who was not a Washington guy, come in and really bring a new approach to how, we ran our country. Because I think, again, I don't want to get too political in this conversation, but I think everyone would agree that DC was in need of something different.
Oh,
we may disagree about what that solution is, and that's fine. And
pretty definitive.
I would say too, David, there's nothing wrong with political discourse. There's nothing wrong with a wide variety of political opinions. I mean, I'm still friends with many people that disagree, but I think we all kind of had this feeling that we need something different.
Mm-hmm.
And he answered that voice.
Yeah.
Now, whatever you think about him, and, again, I don't see him through rose-colored lenses. There are things that, like anybody, he says and does that, we may say and do differently. But I think what people found very attractive is, what came from inside. The motivation was pure.
Right.
Okay. The motivation was to undo this damage and change the trajectory of, I don't care what anybody says. I can say this as an immigrant. I was raised with the ethos that the United States is the envy of the world.
Right.
Do we do it perfectly? No, there's no such thing as perfection.
Mm-hmm.
But people from all over the world still to this day come here and they find freedom.
Right.
And they enjoy a lifestyle that doesn't exist for the overwhelming majority of people on this earth. I mean, we can go on a show like this and I can criticize the president. I can say anything I want. Most countries, you can't do that.
No, you're going to a deep hole somewhere.
I think there are a lot of people in this country that don't appreciate that freedom.
Mm-hmm.
But that's something that my parents would say to me, envy of the world. Almost on a daily basis, the United States is the envy of the world. You're lucky to be here. We would spend a lot of time traveling, seeing our family in the Middle East, and,
mm-hmm.
Even around Europe. And I felt that when I came home. I said, I'm really happy that I'm home.
Wow. That's cool.
So I think he went there.
He felt
to kind of rekindle
that pride.
The greatness of America.
The great.
Because again, I don't want to be partisan, but I think we can all agree that, look at Reagan, let's say, for example. Look at the greatness of America.
That's right.
We had fallen as a guy that at the time was going all over the world.
Apologizing.
Working with different people.
Yeah.
You could see that we had lost our luster. Mm-hmm. And people would kind of take you aside and say, well, what's going on?
Well, I think for me, I felt that just in my service alone. Like, I worked for Clinton, I worked for George Bush Jr., and I worked for Obama. And, the transition, obviously, pre 9/11, I think the fiasco of Somalia and Mogadishu, the fiasco of probably the Khobar tower bombings, and just the non-strength that Clinton was projecting was definitely felt in the organization, in the special operations. And then obviously 9/11 exploded. But then after 10 years, and we're conducting random drone strikes against American citizens and and their children, it's like, okay, where are we at now?
Peace through strength.
Yeah, but at what cost, right? And I think what we had done is we had exhausted that goodwill of America as well too, and we had contorted it. And that leads me back to this idea, all right? So he makes this decision and goes in. What were some of the misconceptions, do you believe, that not only the organization, but his team and his political team, that they didn't expect and what they faced?
I don't think anybody ever expected the magnitude of hatred. Okay. And I'm very specific to use that word, just hatred that was thrown his way. Okay. I can tell you, and again, I'm speaking from my own personal, when Obama was elected, I wasn't happy that night. I woke up the next morning and I said to myself, okay, maybe something good will come out of him. Maybe I'm wrong. This person is going to be the next president of the United States. I will support him. I will respect him. And I will hope and pray that he is the best president ever. Mm-hmm. Why? Because I'm an American and I want to support my president succeeds, the nation succeeds.
Right.
He never was given any of that. It was starting election night, tear him down, smear him, malign him with lies, malign his family with lies. I don't have to go back much further than Russia and all that nonsense, which has now been completely
debunked.
Disproven, debunked,
and the
shown
Durham report.
And I will add that nobody's been held accountable for that.
Not one. I just released a show a little bit ago stating this whole thing. Like, all right, great, but where's the persecution, right? When are we going to have some conviction? Just give me one person, right? Even if you throw an indictment at James Comey, John Brennan, whoever you want, for even if it's not for the president, if it's at Mike Flynn or whatever capacity, the FISA people, the guys.
Let's hope it's coming, David. And that's not, people label it as, it's a revenge. It's not a revenge tour.
It's justice.
It's justice. It's holding people who have broken the law. Okay, broken the law, mm-hmm. Holding them accountable. Okay, so it was really this whole wave of hatred. What's really hatred? Hatred is evil. Mm-hmm. And I don't think anybody really expected, and again, you weren't really dealing with a naive group of people, but nobody really expected what the challenges that came at him from day one. It was just an onslaught, and it really lasted. What else could they throw at him? There were
still going
investigations,
on to this day.
Still going on, impeachments, assassination attempts. There's just a sickness. But I again, being positive, I think there are fringe elements, and they're on both sides.
For sure.
You have crazies on the right and you have crazies on the left. But what I have seen and what I find really encouraging is I think when you get down to the nitty gritty and you scrape below, the politics on the surface, most people are actually, and it's something that I talk about all the time, they're the same.
Yes.
Okay. What do we want? We want to be able to live in freedom. We want to be able to have families. We want to support our families. We want to be able to worship freely. We want our children to have futures. You could say that about a Democrat or Republican or anything.
Doesn't matter.
So I think the good news is, although we're being fed otherwise, I don't think that we are as divided as we're being told we are. And I have a lot of optimism about, despite some of the craziness that's been hurled at DJT over the first 100 or so days, wherever we are right now, I think when we get through some of the really difficult challenges that we're dealing with right now, and we all know what they are, I do think that you're going to see Trump actually uniting people because, I saw it in the organization. I saw it in his leadership style. He isn't the person that he's painted out to be, and he has an amazing ability of bringing people together.
Right.
And you can even see it now, what's going on internationally. Again, I don't profess to be an economic expert, and I don't want to talk too much about tariffs. For better or for worse, they're bringing people to the table to have discussions about, okay, how can we level set? What's a better way to move forward? Again, maybe it isn't the most elegant way, but sometimes you need a disruptor to bring in change.
Well, I agree. Couldn't agree more. And I think what we're seeing and what we have seen as a result of him being the conduit for this hatred, because you couldn't buy him off. And I think that was the thing that disrupted the blob or the deep state or whatever you call it so fundamentally. And we've seen this now, when you have, the Doge and exposing what USAID was actually spending money on and $50 billion and their annual budget and we're, the craziness that we're getting, that's going to disrupt a lot of people's bank accounts and that's going to disrupt the status quo in DC. You have now, since taking a break, leaving the organization in 2017, was it?
I left in 2019.
2019, okay.
When he became president, David, I kind of transitioned. I was executive vice president and counsel,
right?
Much more focused on the development side. I became chief compliance counsel, EVP, and chief compliance counsel globally.
Right.
So I dealt with a lot of the issues that were initially hurled at him, emoluments issues, and I spent a fair amount of time going back and forth in Washington, dealing with various congressional questions and inquiries.
What was that like? I mean, here you're going and you're doing deals, and now all of a sudden you're, compliance within the government is a matrix in and of itself. And now you're being thrust into dealing with people that have potentially a nefarious political agenda. What was that transition?
Looking back, I certainly was naive. It was not something that I had any experience in. Again, like my career,
your pivot
once again pivoted. But I think it was, it was an interesting opportunity. There was a need for it. They had all been very good to me. I really wasn't in a position to go and join the administration for many reasons. So this was a way that I could really help.
Okay, thank you so much for listening today. Pardon the interruption, but I just got to give a shout out to one of our big sponsors here, and this comes from my good friend Alex, who has a family-owned business called Firecracker Farm. When I talk about family business, and I've worked with thousands of family businesses across the country for the last 20 years of public speaking, it's when I meet them and I know that this business is going to succeed and is successful because it's a business that's a part of love and their family and how they support each other. This is that place. I've been to their farm. I watch how they raise their peppers with love. I watch how they process them in this thing they call the Three Kings, and how they infuse them into this beautiful salt, this spicy salt that enhances your food. I put it on my eggs every single morning. I put it on my steak. I put it on my protein. It's in these cool salt shakers, but more so that the product is impeccable. I've even been able to phase out ultra processed sauces, hot sauces, and I'm using this spicy salt. But the thing I know is just how much Alex loves doing this, how much his family loves to support him, and really the quality of the product. So if you believe me and you trust what I'm telling you, please visit firecracker.farm. And if you want a discount, you can type in the discount code RUT, R-U-T, Romeo Uniform Tango 15 to get your discount. Again, a family-owned business. That's incredible. You will love their product. I promise you. That's firecracker.farm.
So I took the challenge, happily, but it wasn't any, and I should also say I had a very, very good team of people. We had, people within the organization. We had a whole field of people that were really expert in that subject. So I certainly, I was probably the smallest, cog on that wheel of trying to figure all this stuff out. But it was interesting because there weren't regulations or statutes or case law that we could go to. This was the first time something like this had ever really happened.
Wow.
So we had all these people coming to us and, saying, the initial issue that we dealt with was this whole issue of the emoluments. And some people would say, well, you have to sell everything. And then I would respond by saying, well, you think it's really that easy? When you sell a house, you put it on the market, it may sit there for a year. You know what it's like trying to sell a $300 million hotel. And then, oh, by the way, you can't sell to people connected with foreign governments, which puts out everybody in the Middle East and India and Asia, the people who normally buy these things. So it was really difficult, but we endeavored to do the best we can in an unscripted territory.
Wow.
And, I think we did a very good job. But, to answer your question again, no, nobody expected the depth of the hatred, the complexity of the challenge, and really the, if I'm being sincere, the insanity that was hurled at us. You had half a government or more that was trying to tear their own president down.
In every way they could.
And, people talk about, the deep state, whatever you want to call it, but you have this whole class of entrenched civil servants. 99% of them are extremely far left.
Mm-hmm.
And I witnessed it over and over again that they would take it upon themselves to try to interfere with the will of the president, the man that was elected lawfully by its citizens. So that whole spirit that we hope, I think that makes us different as Americans, where somebody gets elected and you support them, even if maybe it's not the person you chose, but you support them for the good
office
of the nation.
That's right.
Yeah, you respect the office.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, all that stuff went out the window. And
I think the clearest sensation is there's a group of traditional Washington insiders, those bureaucratic lifers, if you will, that understand the complexities of the grift, and they've gotten really good. When you look at, just the web of NGOs, right? The 7,000 or so NGOs that are affiliated with the State Department, USAID, and some of these other organizations, the Center for an Institute for Peace, or, these things. It's like, wait a minute, what's going on? How does this work? Well, they figure it out, and it's that cyclical thing. You go
cesspool of money.
That's right. It's the cesspool of money.
And it's our money.
That's right.
That's the thing that's so disgusting, David, is that, another thing that amazes me, whatever you think about Elon Musk and all that, this was a man that came from nothing.
Yes.
Okay. And built what he built and overcame so many. We should be so grateful to have people like that. They're willing to come forward and serve, but it just shows you how sick how sick these people are. And we could talk about, I happen to think that there's a lot of it is evil, although they throw that, that's another thing. These are people that say they're just in challenging the president and doing everything they're doing because we're taking on evil.
Yeah,
you got to be very,
David. They use the terms, right?
You got to be very careful, David, when you use that word.
Right.
But having lived through what I lived through, and believe me, on the spectrum of people that encountered headaches, the headaches that I encountered were very minor,
right,
compared to others, and certainly compared to the family and him. Nobody contemplated that level of hatred.
I heard at one point that his legal bills a month were 20, 30 million plus.
Would not surprise me.
Yeah.
And, aside from just the mental drain of being, questioned, investigated, challenged, here you are trying to run a nation which still leads the world. I mean, we do have a responsibility. I'm not going to suggest that America needs to be the world's policeman, but we are leaders, and we do have a responsibility, especially towards weaker nations, to lead, to protect, to provide support. So you have all those challenges in addition to managing the domestic headache. And, you have every person out there that disagrees with you trying to undermine and destroy you. Not easy, but it also shows you the strength. I mean, this guy's a warrior, David.
For sure.
This guy just thrives on conflict and, that never give up ethos. I mean, that's another thing that was really instilled in all of us in the organization. You don't quit. You don't quit under any circumstance. So that's something that I very much try to instill in my own children and in the people around us. We can fail. Okay. Failure is acceptable. As a matter of fact, you measure, what a person is made of when they fail. You see, can they get up? Can they, we all fail.
Right.
But quitting,
no way.
It's just not an option.
Wow.
And I think that's something that, sometimes people will say, what makes somebody successful? And I think, certainly that, I don't quit. That mentality is, a primary driver of how you're going to do in life.
Well, it's interesting where we kind of really intensified our relationship was around that time where you had decided, like, I'm done. I just want to get away from it. I want to go. I want my life back. I want all of that. And, we talked, we'd have these beautiful talks about, the intensity of what that integrity looks like, being in the fight, the never quit mindset. And those are, some of my most fondest memories during those very difficult times over the last 4 years, because as you and your colleagues watched a relentless pursuit, if you will, I saw, my colleagues in the work that we've done essentially demoralized in terms of the Afghan withdrawal, the attempted conviction of Eddie Gallagher, all of this madness that, on a different space and different industry, obviously, but it was there. And so the recognition of that potential and what it grew into, I think, is transformative, and it really affected me. It got me back wanting to do this, but to do it in a way that now I can have these conversations when we can discuss these things in a much more articulate or a sense, not sensitive, but more an intimate measure, right? A reflection of, hey, what are the challenges and looking forward. Coming through all of that transition, you re-engaged in that never quit mindset, and you launched Javelin Advisors. Can you talk a little bit why you wanted to do that, knowing what the landscape you had just kind of navigated for the prior 8 years, and what you and your team hope to accomplish moving forward?
Sure. Javelin Advisors is a government relations consulting and lobbying firm. We're based in Washington. The genesis behind it was really simple. We had this favorable change politically, and we saw it, obviously as an opportunity for us to do something different for ourselves, for our families, but equally, or maybe more importantly, we saw it as an opportunity to do some good. We know a lot of people that are currently in government, and we would like to use those contacts to help to do some good. So myself, my longtime friend Keith Schiller, and my longtime friend Rob Seiden, we all came together and said, "Look, let's see if we could do some good here." And none of us. I worked with Keith for a long time in the Trump organization. Keith started his career in the Navy. Then he spent many years in law enforcement, NYPD detective, then came on board to the organization. He was head of security globally, was also President Trump's personal bodyguard. And when President Trump went to the Oval Office, Keith was director of operations for the Oval Office. Robert Seiden is another close friend, longtime lawyer, legendary New York City prosecutor under the great Bob Morgenthau. I think he spent 15 years in there, never lost a case.
Wow.
He has his own specialty firm. They're a litigation boutique shop, and he also has an investigations firm globally. His firm actually did a lot of the investigations for the organization when we were vetting partners.
Right.
So that's initially how I met Rob. So it was a closely knit, tight group of people. And we brought in, we have a lot of other people that work for us, but we're very focused. We're focused on higher level West Wing cabinet. We're currently doing some FARA work. We have a number of different clients, but again, the focus is to try to do some good for the United States, try to bring some not so friendly governments closer to the United States, introduce the whole concept of economic diplomacy. Well, I shouldn't really say introduce. It's something that's been out
Revitalize.
there. Reinforce it that, I'll even go so far as to say this, in the Middle East, there's a lot of players there that over the past 20 or 30 years, they may not love each other, but they started to work together. They started to do business with each other, one step at a time. Hey, I'm doing business with this guy. He's on the other side of the line, but he's got a wife like I do.
Mm-hmm.
He's got kids like I do. He's got the same sort of drives in life. So through that concept of doing business, you start to get to know people. And, again, I can use the Middle East. I can even use places like Northern Ireland where I've done a lot of work.
Mm-hmm.
Different parties may not love each other. There's still some distrust, but they're working together. There's peace. They're moving in the right direction. So that was a big part of the push for what we're doing by trying to bring in these concepts of economic diplomacy to try to do some good for the United States and for our clients.
I think that is a fascinating analysis. So often people throw out that term of lobbyists, and the negative connotation is already infused into it regardless, right? But what people don't understand is that beneath the geopolitical aspect, right? Your army's this army, we're this, this is how we're gonna establish some type of interaction. There's a million other avenues towards that. And the most predominant and effective tool is through business.
That's right.
And people don't understand that.
It's a very powerful tool. Business brings prosperity. When people can work, they can feed and provide for their families. It's less likely they're going to fight with each other, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's a big part of what we're doing. I can't get into minutia, but we are doing a lot of work with Pakistan.
Wow.
We are foreign agents. We registered under FARA. And, initially, I'd be disingenuous to admit that it wasn't something that we thought about and did a lot of kind of internal discussion. But what we've found, we've confirmed. I mean, Pakistan has an interesting past. But the current regime that we're working with, these are very smart, well-educated, pro-West. They did what they had to do under prior administrations that maybe didn't treat them so well.
Mm-hmm.
But everything that we're seeing now is a willingness to work with the United States on all levels, to trade with us, to share information with us. A lot of what the administration, and again, I should say very clearly that I am not part of the administration. I was never part of the administration. I don't speak on behalf of the administration, but a lot of the efforts now are counter China. We've put ourselves in a very vulnerable position, whether it's with medications or minerals, where we're dependent on I don't know if you want to call them a hostile power, but a foreign power for things that we need. And we're all guilty of it, David.
Oh,
I mean,
God.
we paid $1 for something that had we made here would have cost us $3. I mean, this is 30 years of
exporting that thing for cheaper labor
at the cost of our own
national security.
Workers, national security, our own citizens. We're trying to pull it all back.
Well, that's fascinating to me. You talked a little bit about, you just mentioned minerals, and for what most people don't understand is how pivotal rare earth minerals are for the development of pretty much almost every new technology that's out there.
Cell phones, watches, vehicles, of course, the defense sector. I mean, you name, the item or the sector, and you will find that minerals are needed. Minerals are needed. Lithium is needed for batteries. Well, guess what? 95% of our minerals are sourced from foreign adversaries, mainly China and Russia.
Right.
And what's even more maddening is that the excavation that we're doing here in the United States, for example, there's a rare earth facility in Mountain Pass, California. We don't have refineries here. So anything that gets pulled out of the ground is sent to China. And
Are you kidding me?
No.
Oh my
so
gosh.
we've allowed ourselves over decades to become extremely vulnerable. And this was actually something that Trump the first administration, recognized as not just a supply chain issue, but a matter of national security.
Wow.
And the tragedy of it as well is that we have a lot of these materials here in the United States. So there's a real effort now to change some of the regulations that have been holding up drilling, to start to mine and refine these minerals here in the United States. But in the interim, it doesn't happen overnight.
No.
It's a 5 to 10 year process. We're headed down the right track. But we have countries, again, like Pakistan, that are coming to, again, these are not countries that historically, have been that aligned with the United States, but now they're coming in to fill these gaps. And, I see a real willingness from Pakistan and a number of other nations to kind of move away from where they've been with China and become much more aligned with the United States.
That's just fascinating. I'm, you always hope, people get so caught up on the wave tops of what they're seeing on a regular basis, and they don't understand the minutia of the energy that drives the wave top. And so it's fascinating that you can come on and really illuminate that a little bit more for people. I appreciate that.
These are tremendous. I mean, if you think about it, I think let's all be optimistic about the whole situation now that's brewing between India and Pakistan, because these are two great nations that have over 2 billion people, that have tremendous resource, tremendous history. I saw the president make a comment coming off of Air Force One that, look, we want to resolve this by doing deals and getting everybody to work together instead of with bullets. And I thought that was a great,
love it,
thing. We have to stop, resist this urge to engage in kinetic warfare. I think you can understand it's not, to me, you go to war. Is it necessary? Yes, when all else fails, it's necessary. And we're very grateful that we have people that are willing and able to do it. But it represents a failure, and really we should try to exhaust every remedy before going that route.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this whole concept of economic diplomacy
It's brilliant.
It's a sound one, and let's exhaust that and a number of other things before we send people's children, people's brothers, people's sisters, people's sons, people's daughters, people's husbands and wives to face bullets. And I think it's something that I have great admiration. I mean, the president is strong. He's not going to hesitate to defend us when necessary, but I think he respects that. It's a last resort.
On that, tell the audience a little bit about your book and
yeah, I wrote a book, David.
Yeah.
It was published years ago, but really the reasoning behind it, again, it was not something that I ever I never set out in my life to write a book.
Right.
But I was having a conversation once in the Oval Office, and he was very frustrated about people that had written books about me. And he made a comment that, people, they sit with me for an hour and they say that they're my biographer and they write books. So I, said, look, I'd like to write a book. And, I got that stare for about 30 seconds and he said, go ahead and do it. And to his credit, the book that you're holding,
right,
that's the version that he saw. There was no interference. I had, a lot of help from my co-author and a number of other people that contributed to the book, but it was really an attempt to show the other side of him through example, through stories. It's a compilation of stories. It's very easy to read, very easy to digest. It doesn't really delve too much into the politics, but it gives you a slice of stories about what he was like, what it was like to work in the organization, what it was like to work in the family, how we handled challenges, how we dealt with failure, how we dealt with victories. So it kind of gives you an insight into what he's like. And I've had people over the years, David, because we went out and promoted it heavily. And, we went on we did all the media circuit. And I spoke at probably 50 different venues. I've had people come up to me and said, I hated the guy, but I read your book and I look at him a little different.
Oh, wow.
And it makes me really happy
that's
because
fantastic.
that's kind of what I tried to do.
Yeah.
So it was an attempt to really show the human side of him that I know. And it was a fun, rewarding thing to do. I think there's probably another book or two once you get through it, and again, I really did have a lot of help from my co-author. But once you get through it, the drive to do it again, so I have that little voice now in my head that's like, you got to do a part two.
Well, let's hope that part two comes after a very successful another term and awesome.
Thanks.
So I hope you enjoyed this with George Sorial. He's an amazing human being, a great friend. Check him out on LinkedIn. He's got Sorial Consulting. If you're interested, they deal a ton with business development, any type of real estate development. They're a wonderful consulting firm. Or if you're interested, check out Javelin Advisors. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, sir.
My pleasure, my friend. I'm always happy to come and talk to you, brother.
God bless.
God bless you.